Okay, so listeners, welcome back to the podcast. It's great to have Chris Stanley with me here today. Chris is going to talk a little bit about mini book publishing and all kinds of things along those lines. Chris, how are you?
Man, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Excited to be here. I appreciate you bringing me on.
No problem. It's great to have you here. Yeah, so Chris, let's just start off by going straight into it. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me about your background, your work, your family, hobbies, all that kind of stuff. Tell me about yourself.
Hobbies. We're
Hobbies,
going
yeah.
deep down the rabbit trail here. Um, well, basically, background is I'm an insurance adjuster by trade. So the guys who look at a wrecked car, that's what I've done for 15 plus years. That's the industry I've been in. And so my father-in-law taught me how to do that, mentored me, brought me in into the industry and kind of snuck me in. And I didn't know it was anything special that I got in. Uh, but turns out 8 years in, I'm looking to start an online business that like, hey, a lot of other people wanted to know how to get started doing the same thing.
Mm,
And someone mentioned you should teach people how to do that online. So that was kind of what started. Well, not necessarily that was the successful start to an online business. Was actually starting to teach people about this industry I'd gotten into. And so from there is kind of where the whole journey begins. That what leads us here today. Wrote books for insurance, then wrote other books because I loved writing so much, started podcasts, all that stuff. And the business has done really good over the past 7, almost 8 years now. And
mm.
so my family and I have lived remote full time. Right now, we're in our school bus. That's what you're seeing behind me. Is I'm here in my school bus in Texas right now. But we travel full time here or in our sailboat. And
Wow.
so our life is a very big mix of nomadic internet culture mixed with we try to keep things as simple as possible, yet our life is completely contrary to that. Like we're digital marketers with Starlink in the middle of a national park right now. Like it doesn't sound very simple, but in our heads, we try to stay grounded and simple with a simple life, but with
Mm.
an internet business. So that's kind of a lot thrown at you there. You can take it wherever you want from there, man.
Nice. So you guys live in a bus on a sailboat, is that what you're
Yep.
saying?
Yep.
Wow,
We have a
that's
school
good.
bus and a sailboat. We have 3 boys, and they've all basically grown up in that nomadic culture. They've been born at all different places. We've never stayed one place for very long. I think 2 years was the longest when we had a job in Colorado. And other than that, it's pretty much full time traveling.
That's so cool. I never heard of anyone really doing that before in recent times. That's really, really, really cool lifestyle for you guys, yeah?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we love it. That's the beard is the sailor beard. Like insurance, this doesn't they don't necessarily love beards in insurance. They like the real clean cut or trimmed look. But
Yeah.
as I got more and more into the coaching side, I'm like, I don't have to be as much that tight fit. I
Mm.
can, let it grow like I want to as a sailor. So
That's so cool. Yeah, it suits you, man. Really suits you. Um, and let's talk about mini books, and this is kind of what this conversation is going to be about today.
yeah.
How would you define a mini book, Chris? If someone had never really heard of what a mini book actually is before, how would you define it?
Well, if you try to explain or let it chat GTP transcribe anything that talks about mini books, it's MINI,
Mm,
not MANY, which is what normally gets transcribed. So uh, mini books, though, really came about for me before I had a term for it. I was writing books for my insurance adjusting clients and customers, and really nobody cared who I was. I was talking on the internet. Anybody done that? And nobody cared. For about 6 months, had a podcast, blogged, talked on LinkedIn. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares until suddenly one day somebody did care. One or two
mm,
people started to care. And I actually had a company say, hey, we want you to basically create a program for them, do some vetting for them, a whole big thing, right? Like it was a huge breakthrough for me. Like, whoa, no one's paid me a dime, even though I have a course for sale. No one's bought it. Uh, but then they suddenly want me to come do this for them. And I
mm,
negotiated as part of that agreement to come work with them for a month or two that, like, hey, I'm going to write a book in my time. And that's a part of this program that I'm building. And I'm going to own the program, but I'm doing it for you guys. So it's dirt cheap for you guys.
mm,
And so I wrote a legacy nonfiction book, about a 30,000 word book at that time. And that was my first book.
mm.
And so as time goes on, I end up writing 9 books total for the insurance adjusting community.
Wow.
And one of them um, I was co-authoring with somebody else, and it was a really big book. It was like the biggest undertaking I'd ever taken. It was like how to get a job as an insurance adjuster at like Geico, right? Like
Mm.
how do you get this job? That was what I thought the big market was. But as I did it, I realized that one chapter in that book about how to do a resume was ballooning to over 10,000 words. And I'm like, I can't release a book with a 10,000 word chapter in it.
Yeah.
And so we spun it off as a mini book. We didn't know to call it that, but it was a short book just about the resume section.
Mm.
And so that was what kind of started this shorter book, intentionally shorter book. I'd written other books that were kind of on the shorter side, but it wasn't intentional, right? It was like kind of just happenstance. I stopped. Oh, that's where it ends.
Mm.
But that one was like really like, okay, this is just a small little piece of the puzzle we want to solve thoroughly, but it ends up not being that long.
Mm. Wow. That's really interesting. And in terms of that book, did you then split up the rest of it into like smaller sections, or just that one bit that you made into a mini
So
book?
so what we did, because we were like almost done with it when I realized it. I was the writer. I was a part of the research who did it, but my co-author and I, we were kind of bantering it back and forth. And I'm like writing it out, and I'm like, we're basically done with the book, but I'm realizing this is too big. This is too in depth. We have to trim it back. And
Mm.
so we spun it off before the big book was done. We said, let's just release this as a teaser for the
Mm.
big book. It took it went way better than the big book. It did.
Yeah.
It sold twice as many copies, and
Mm.
people love that book. And what I accidentally did and found out is, you know it. We all say it. The riches are in the niches, or drill down, or whatever. But like by drilling down on a very specific problem, the resume of an adjuster, which is like so niche of a niche of a niche,
Mm.
it actually came into a bigger pool of people than people who wanted to just get a job at an insurance company. Because now, if you wanted to change insurance companies, it applied to them. If you
Mm.
wanted to not work at Geico, but just needed a resume and happened to be an adjuster, it pulled
Mm.
in. So as it drilled down on the problem, the audience actually expanded. And
Okay.
I kind of had a light bulb go off that, like, I've always heard that. I've always said that. I've lived it even in my business, but this is different with a book. I went deeper, smaller problems, smaller book, and then from there, I started looking for smaller books and doing more smaller books, and
Mm.
stumbled across Category Pirates. If anybody's familiar with them, they
Mm.
have a huge Substack. They're one of the top Substacks, and they started their Substack and started releasing mini books on it, which were, in their words, I think it was 3 to 8,000 words
Mm.
twice a month. And I said, "Whoa, that's kind of like what I was doing." And so I watched what they did, and I said, I think there's something here. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, are you going to write about mini books? Are you going to help people write them? Because if not, I want to. I've been writing for 7 years, and I think there's something here. And they
Mm.
said, no, we're not planning on it. So I said, I'm going to write a book. And I sat down for 3 days, wrote a book. It's this one, the mini book model. I
Mm.
released it, and just let it sit there for a year. And I said, let me just put my flag in the ground and go back to my business and come back a year later.
Mm.
And it had gathered over 50 reviews at the time, and it was doing well. And I was getting people saying, it worked for me. I wrote a small book, and I loved it. And so I was like, I think that's my next thing I want to talk about online. And
Mm.
so that's when I started the Substack. I think it was in August. Now we're in November, July, August, sometime around there, and started talking about it more. And that's kind of what mini books are. But to define it now that we got the long backstory out of the way, to define a mini book, it's a book that is 5 to 15,000 words long.
Okay.
So a traditional nonfiction, legacy nonfiction book is 30,000 words plus
Mm.
normally. The publisher's not going to look at you if it's not 30,000 words. Well, we're saying, no, let's zero in on the topic, write a smaller book, completely solves a problem in under 15,000 words.
Mm. Amazing. I love that approach. It's so different. And obviously you talk about category pirates and that sort of thing, doing it already, but I mean people want that kind of stuff. They want solutions quickly to problems, and they want just that one single solution. And I think if you can package that up in a book that's digestible like that, that's such a great product to be able to market on the internet. You mentioned there briefly, Chris, but how long does it take you to create a mini book from start to finish? So like writing it and putting it all together, designing it, getting it out there. What does that process look like?
All depends on how familiar you are with your topic. I've written a mini book and it's taken like that one was 3 days. Like I knew what I wanted to write.
Hmm.
I use very simple outlines to guide me, to make sure I don't let scope creep come in and just like start going crazy, right? I want to keep it really tight. And so I'll start with a really strict outline where I can't go too far. And then I just go at it if it's a topic I really know. And
Yeah.
so like that one took 3 days. I've written another one in 7 days, the mini book Straight Jacket, which was about how to write a book in 7 days. So
Hmm.
I knew I had to do it in under 7 days or I was heresy, right? Um, and so, but I've had some take months, because it was something I wanted to explore further, and I didn't have all the data, I didn't have all the experience yet. So I think a big key for someone thinking about writing a mini book or any book really is like if you choose a topic that you're super familiar with, you've already solved a problem for, that's
Hmm.
the best first book to write
Yeah.
because you shouldn't have to go do research. You shouldn't have to go do interviews. You should just go, I'm going to vomit what I know onto this page and tell somebody how I solved a problem I've already solved.
Yeah.
That doesn't take a lot of time, because you already know it. It's intuitive to you, and that's how
Hmm.
they can be really quick. But you can spend as long as you want on a mini book in theory.
Hmm. Amazing. And again, you already kind of touched on this already, but what would you say are the benefits of writing like a mini book over a normal length book, like a longer kind of version of it? What's the primary reason why someone should focus on mini rather than fuller length?
I think mini books serve a really good purpose for a lot of different situations. But like for me, when I wrote the mini book model, other than it being the mini book model, it needed to be mini, right? But for
Mm,
that, I wanted to test, was this a topic people are interested in, right?
mm,
I wanted to put my flag in the ground in a hurry and go back to my life. I couldn't set aside a month or two, or even some people 6 months or a year to write a book. I just couldn't. It didn't have the bandwidth. I'm a dad. I run an online business, or I have a daily job, and it's like I can't fit that in and spend all this time. But if I just do a mini book, it allows it to be done quicker, and it
mm,
also tests the waters before you go spend a lot of time. The other thing
mm,
it really helps me with is it crystallizes my thoughts, because a lot of times we know things but we don't know how to communicate them yet.
mm.
And so if you're a business owner and you're like, I understand what I offer but I can't communicate it,
Yeah.
like that's what I've seen a lot of us struggle with, is like we're too close to the problem. Well, if
Mm,
you force yourself to write about your topic in a mini book, suddenly you have the business card, the brochure of the century, the credibility that establishes you as a true credible source that David could go in his bedroom sitting with his wife and learn about you
mm.
and decide whether you're full of crap or not. Like that power is huge, and a lot of people don't do that necessarily even with a Substack. I don't read Substack sitting in my bed. I
Mm,
don't want my phone in my face any more than it already has to be, right? So a book is either on a Kindle or a physical copy, really still has that intimacy with a reader that I think a lot of digital writing doesn't. But you can
mm.
take your Substack, shove it into a book, and I mean, you take a good Substack series and shove it in a mini book, and we have people doing it all the time that are going through mini book publishing that are like, I wrote this series on, you know, efficiency and productivity for accountants or whatever it is. And like, I'm going to put that in a mini book. So like, I think those benefits are that you're not tackling a mountain. You're
Mm.
taking a trail.
Yeah.
It's already there. It's already paved. Just start walking it, right?
Yeah. That's a great analogy, a great way to look at it. Um, and I think one of the things that a lot of writers struggle with in terms of writing books is promoting them. So what is your promotion process look like once you've actually created the book and it's out there? How do you go about promoting it to your audience?
Well, there's this thing that I don't like to hear that no authors like to hear, which is writing the book is at best 20% of the process, right? I know you're 2 books behind you. Your third's about to ready to come out. Like writing the book is hard and it's like birthing, but it's kind of like childbirth. You have another 18 years of raising. That's the hard part, right? Like as painful as that experience was, I now have to deal with this baby or this book that has been birthed into the world. And it has to do with coaching it, with nurturing it, with marketing it. And so I have this 80-20 rule I try to abide by, which is like if I'm spending 20% of my time writing, then 80% of my time really needs to be marketing it. What am I doing? I'm here talking to David, spending an hour here, whereas I spent an hour writing earlier. Well, now I got to turn that into a Substack. I got to share this episode I do with you, right? But it's like if you don't let people know that this thing exists or help people solve the problem, that's another form of marketing, that your book says you solve, then no one's going to really hear about it. And
Mm,
so you have to like spend that time to do it. So my process has changed over the years, obviously, but by and large, it's been talk about your topic basically every day on whatever platform. And I got a whole book about it here, called The Simple Online Business Model. But
mm,
that's how I actually run my business is I focus on sharing on the topic roughly 3 times a week, sometimes every day, um, repurposing good content into newsletters,
mm,
which then feed the bigger ecosystem, right? And then taking those topics that I see new pain points pop up, like, hey, Chris, how do you publish Amazon? I don't want to write that book, but I keep getting asked it, so I'm going to write another book on how to publish to Amazon, right? And so just kind of using your marketing and your writing interwoven
mm,
as a system rather than as standalone events. So I use my Substack as like that's the chapters of my book.
mm,
You know, the email newsletter you're sharing to your audience most of the time is a chapter from an upcoming book of
mm,
mine. You know, I'm sharing that. That's my premium content for the week. Everything else is kind of like, hey, I had this random thought, or here's a new tool you guys can use, or here's a podcast interview I did. But that key piece of content is my book, but that's a form of marketing. I'm
mm.
now using that as content to pull more people in, which in turn promotes the books and promotes the bigger ecosystem. And a lot of times they'll go back and check out the other books.
Mm.
So that's kind of been my process evolved. And then obviously all the things that most people think book marketing about, podcast interviews to book promos.
Mm.
I'm a huge believer in book promos. I know some authors, especially fiction authors, I think really hate book promos because you're like giving away your baby for free or really inexpensive. But I found that to build up your readership and your credibility to the point where you have 50, 100, 300 reviews to where people start to view your work as legitimate,
Mm.
it really takes that surge of volume to get that credibility and voracious readers, which book promo people are.
Mm.
So I'm a huge advocate for book promos, even though they cost money and you're giving away things to people that, you know, some would say, well, they're never going to spend money with you. But to me, the point isn't to get them to buy a coaching program for me as much as it is I want to get their honest feedback on a review and have that credibility on Amazon
Mm.
of people have read this book and it actually has been read by more than his mom and aunt.
Mm. Yeah, good advice. Talking about book promos there, is there like a certain platform you would use for that specifically, or what way do you go about it?
Um, I followed David Garon for years. He's a fiction author. He also helps, you know, Amazon Decoded was his book, and he's kind of who I've looked at and followed for years in terms of book promos and Amazon. Um, and so he has a whole long list of different book promo sites, and each one has different genres that they kind of thrive in. But for me, as a nonfiction person, the Holy Grail is BookBub. You
Mm.
know, if you can, I've gotten one BookBub deal and you know I move 12,000 copies in a single day like that
Wow.
that changes the dynamics of what your book looks like on Amazon.
Mm.
But then other ones that are really good is Fussy Librarian, Free Booksy or Bargain Booksy, that whole word I think can't remember their company name, but it's word almost like WordPress. I always get them confused with WordPress, but yeah. um, but those promo sites and Robin Reads are really good. But really anyone that has a decent readership that you're spending $30, $40 to get a few hundred to few thousand downloads, it's a
Mm.
pretty good exchange.
Yeah, yeah. No, great advice, great advice. I've seen Book Bubble a lot, actually, something I need to look into as well. And I know other authors rave about it and they say it's like so effective if they can get a deal with it. They really are able to shift a lot of books and get a lot of readers. Um,
The
Chris,
thing with
go
BookBub,
ahead.
just before we pivot, is they really are particular. Whereas most will just take your money and promote it. They don't really give a flying flip. They're just promoting it, right? Cool. That's the deal. BookBub is really a curated list to the readers, and they're the biggest.
Mm.
So they aren't going to accept your book most of the time if you have less than 50 for sure. But some people have said they've gotten it with a less than 100. But what I've seen, I didn't even get a deal until I was in the 80s, and
Mm.
I was applying consistently. I don't apply as consistent as I should anymore, but so you have to apply every month with each book to
Yeah.
see if you qualify, and they will select less
Mm.
than 10% is what I've seen. It seems like less than 10% that apply. And
Mm.
so when you get one, it costs $300-400, but it's like the best $300-400 investment you could do. You could spend
Mm.
$300-400 on their ad platform, which is great. I love their ad platform, which gets to those same readers, but you're paying money for that
Mm.
on a per click or per view basis impression.
Yeah.
But that is not near as effective. Your $300-400 is not going to go as far as what it will to you know tens of thousands of people actually downloading your book.
Yeah. Gonna have to get Big Bob to sponsor this episode, I think, after all this conversation we're having. Good promotion for them. And then Chris, I don't want to ask about Substack then, because obviously you mentioned this already, but you're on the platform, you got a publication there now. What brought you to Substack? Why did you decide to move to here?
Well, Category Pirates had been on there for a while. They kind of paved the way for me. Like, this is something legitimate, and I'm not one who's on social media. LinkedIn's the only one I've ever been on.
Mm.
I've posted there for 7-8 years, and it really took an algorithm change over the last 6 months, a year. Like, to the really, they went to like this weird super growth mode where they loved influencers, and it seemed like everyone could become like an overnight influencer and just get tens of thousands of people. I didn't, because I'm an insurance adjuster topic, right? Like, I missed that boom, a lot of it. And so I was like, man, it seems like it's really hard in my algorithm, that for me particularly, to shift topics, even though I have my company talking about insurance adjusting, but now I talk about mini books.
Mm.
But my audience, by and large, that's been built there is what? It's insurance adjusters. They're not authors or business owners wanting to be authors.
Mm.
So I knew I kind of had to shift, but I didn't want a traditional social media. I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't be on Facebook or X or whatever, or, dear God, TikTok. I just can't. I don't live that way. I just can't be that active
Yeah.
on those platforms. And so I was like, I just want to write, right? That's all us authors. We just want to write. We just want to write books. And so when I saw, what Category Pirates was doing, I thought that this is what I should do. I should use this. They have this thing called Notes now. It's up and coming. It's kind of like a social media thing, tie in. You can expand yourself. And so let me try this premium newsletter concept
Mm.
with mini books and try to do a more hands-off business than my last one. Let me see if I can write my way to a paycheck, right? Write for a living.
Yeah. Brilliant. And that's where you are now, which is great. So tell me about your publication. So what is the structure of it, and in terms of like what paid subscribers get, what are their perks, and what do you offer for people?
For me, the main primary content, as I mentioned before, is usually a chapter of an upcoming book.
Mm.
So, like right now, I'm in mini book marketing. That's the book I'm working on. That's the book series or the chapter series that's getting released as it's being written
Mm.
to the Substack audience, one chapter a week. And then a lot of times, if that chapter, I have an idea for like a tool or a template, then that goes to the premium subscribers. Like, okay, here's today I did a chat GTP to write your author email welcome sequence based on your manuscript. So
Mm.
you give the chat GTP the manuscript, I give it all the templates and whatever, and it spits out you 6 emails to where you don't have to go write your own email sequence.
Mm.
So tools like that to try to make it easier to do the marketing or the editing. I have an editing chat GTP, things like that. So like
Mm.
anything that's going to make the author's life easier, that's what I'm looking for. And that goes to the premium subscribers.
Mm.
And then I recently shifted, and I think I talked to you about this offline, is I shifted to where it's basically a revolving 1 month. So is free. So like if you're
Mm.
on the newsletter, you're going to get all the episodes or chapters coming to you. But once a month's passed, it kind of gets archived to premium subscribers. So that way, if you want to go back through the old courses or through the old books, um, you got to be a premium member.
Mm.
Uh, and so, but that's basically the structure, right? It's just trying to build courses or solutions for authors, one brick at a time, sharing it in real time, and then trying to help them through the community features to give them advice as a mini book coach without necessarily having a true coaching program at the moment. We're
Mm.
trying to do it without that. I want it to be a little more community driven,
Mm.
content driven, and I'm a high price for a Substack. It's $35 a month, but
Mm.
compared to like if I said, hey, David, if you want me to coach you through your book, make you a bestseller, I'm going to be $3,000, right? Like it's so I'm like it's a different trade off, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm trying it a different way rather than that because my last business was a high end coaching product, which I really liked. It's really
Mm.
fun, but it's much more involved.
Yeah. Yep. No, it's brilliant. And your publication is so clear as well. Like everything about it is just moving people in a certain direction, giving them really clear, practical, applicable advice, which is brilliant, and I love that about it. In terms of the future, Chris, so in terms of Substack and mini book publishing in general, where do you see yourself kind of going in the next few years?
Well, the biggest goal of mini book publishing as a publication, as a business, as a brand, if you call it that, is to help more people publish mini books.
Mm.
Because if more people publish mini books, then that's what's going to further the cause of mini books, right? Like it's a self-feeding cycle of all boats rise. And so that's kind of where I'm focused. Is like, can we get more people to write mini books and call them mini books
Mm.
rather than just there's lots of short ebooks out there. It could be 20 pages, right? You buy an ebook, you spent $300 on it. Not that I've ever done that, but and then you get it and you're like, what is this Canva PDF 20-page? Did I really just pay that much for this? Like, yeah, they they fulfilled the promise, sort of, but that wasn't what I was expecting, right?
Mm.
But like a true define that market, define that format as something that's recognized by readers as a place to go. And then beyond that, just developing a true market and reward system for mini book authors. One of the things I launched
Mm.
this fall was something called the Mini Book Hall of Fame. And so
Mm.
you can head to bookhalloffame.com and see it. But basically, if you get over 50 reviews and you have a mini book, you can submit and be added to the Mini Book Hall of Fame. And it has
Mm.
different tiers to where it rewards mini book authors for actually doing the hard work of promoting and marketing. Because
Yeah.
too many of us, we write a mini book, we never tell nobody about it.
Mm. Yeah. No, it's brilliant. Great incentive. Yeah, I mean, we talked about this already, but like marketing is just so difficult for authors, I think, in general. And I think anything we can do to kind of encourage people to really think about it in a serious way and not just kind of think, once I finish the book, that's it done, and I don't have to do any more work because the 80%, as you say, comes after that, and that's where the real hard work begins. So I love that. I love the Hall of Fame idea and just really encourage people to push themselves to try and, market their books really effectively. Um, just as we finish, Chris, I want to ask you the question I ask everyone in this podcast, which is, if you had one sort of golden nugget of advice that you want people to take away from this about how to earn money from writing, what would you say that would be?
I kind of already said it once, and I'll reiterate it, but then I'll give it a second. Is that write about a problem you solved, even if
Mm.
someone else helped you solve it, right? If David helped you figure out how to write your fiction book, fantastic, but you had a different experience than David. You're a different talking to a different audience than David or I ever would. So write about whatever problem it is that you've learned how to solve. So that's number one way. Don't go think you got to go find the market and then write about that. Like, no, find a market you're comfortable in and start there. You can always pivot later.
Mm.
So that initial piece I already talked about. But the second thing is, especially to nonfiction authors. Now, I can't talk much to fiction authors, but nonfiction authors, if you're looking to make money from your writing, don't look at your mini book as a book. Look at this, as your business engine.
Mm.
Because from this same book, I've created a course, which is now in, the Substack. I create how many email can
Yep.
I generate off that book? With ChatGPT, it's endless, right? You could literally have it spit out emails for days from different angles. You can create coaching programs around that. You can create cohorts around that, which is just time-based courses, right? Like, but one mini book is enough to literally make you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. The only way that happens, though, is if people find that solution or you find the people with that problem, and
Mm.
that's marketing. So don't just write 10 books and just sit there and go, I hope they find it. It's like, no, write a book, sure, write another book maybe as your marketing piece, like I'm doing, like, hey, content. But the focus is what? I'm really still building a business around this book. This is
Mm.
my primary book. This is my business, mini book model. And
Yep.
so find that thing. And if you don't like it, 6 months in, all the lessons you learned, even the audience you built, a lot of it will transfer.
Mm.
You've learned the skill sets. And so don't feel like you're trapped in insurance adjusting for forever, right? Like, no, for 7 years, I built that and I'm making a great living off of it. But those skills are the same skills I'm now using for the mini book publishing.
Mm.
And so, you know, just think of it as an engine. Don't think of it as just a product that takes too much time and makes you $2 on Amazon. That's the framework, the base of an entire business, and that's a book eventually I'll write called Book to Business Model. And it's just you take a book and you build a whole business out of it.
Brilliant. Brilliant, Chris. Is Substack the best place to find you? If someone's looking for you, is that the best place to go?
That's probably the best, especially if you're interested in mini book publishing.
Yeah.
That's where I'm most active these days. And if you want to find the Substack easy, it's minibook.news.
Okay.
We'll get you there, minibook.news.
Brilliant. Perfect. Chris, thank you so much. It's a really good conversation. I'm really interested in this, and I'm sure our readers and listeners will be as well
Yeah.
whenever I publish this. Because yeah, as you say, I don't think enough people understand what mini books are or can define it properly. And I think the products you've created and that system you've created and the books you've written are going to help them get there. So it's great that you're doing this and you're kind of pioneering this in many ways, especially on Substack. So it's great. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, man. It was fun.
Yeah. Have a great day. I'll talk to you again soon.
All right, man.
Hey, friend. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you enjoyed it, or if you enjoyed any previous episodes of the How to Write for a Living podcast, make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast episodes. Don't forget, you can also subscribe to my mailing list on Substack on How to Write for a Living. It'd be great to see you there as well. But definitely make sure you check out all previous episodes of the podcast. Give them a listen. They're well worth your time, and I'm sure you'll enjoy them. Don't forget to subscribe here and on Substack, and I will see you again really soon. Thanks for listening.